Okay, part 2 of You Season 4 is here, and yeah, it went off the rails all right. It's just so messy and dumb messy. And I still feel like it just focuses on a bunch of things that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. I'm not gonna recap part 1 because it's been so recent. If you haven't caught my part 1 video, you should do that now to refresh yourself and be ready for this. But the one thing I will say is that this second part does remember the type of monster Joe is while also just veering him off in a different direction. Because it expresses that monstrosity in a big dumb way. It does blend a few interesting concepts together, things that I was really excited to see on TV, but then the execution again is where this season continuously fails me. But whatever part 1 was doing doesn't matter anymore. Like you need to have watched it and or at least my video to kind of keep up with what's going on here, but like quite literally you can toss so much of it out a window. And if this had all come out at once, that might not have been as much of an issue, but right now it's like making people wait an entire month to wrap this up, and then it just undercuts everything that feels like it was set up in the first part. Doesn't even feel like the same mission and storytelling anymore. They set up all this stuff with a class killer, and then it feels like it doesn't really matter. Like money and class still absolutely play a part in this second section of the season, but it doesn't feel like the logical follow through from where we started. Also, baiting people with Victoria Pedretti, I saw right through you, Netflix. So again, if you have not seen my part 1 video, you should do that now. Like right now. Thank you. So the big questions we were left with were, who is this woman with the camera? Is Rhys even really here? Will Marianne pop back up? And are more rich snobs going to die? So they don't drop the twist in this first episode, but there is definitely some more mysteries and deception to be had. And if you also want to feel mysterious, you need today's sponsor, Surfshark. Just connect to any one of their thousands of different server locations on any of your devices, and that's where your internet will think you are. Ooh, mysterious. But once again, I will be traveling to the United States for a film festival and will not have access to my Canadian Crave subscription. Meaning I won't be able to watch The Last of Us, but this time it's the finale. And I can't miss the finale. And thanks to Surfshark, I won't. All I'll have to do is connect to a Canadian server location so my internet thinks I'm back home, and I'll be able to catch the finale right on time. And you can take advantage of this across a variety of different streaming services. I'm always using it on things like Hulu that don't exist here in Canada, so I can catch up on some shows that aren't streaming here. It also just helps me feel more secure when I'm accessing public Wi-Fi when I'm traveling or just working at a coffee shop by helping protect and encrypt my personal data. So let Surfshark open up your viewing world while protecting your personal online world. It's super fast, secure, blocks unwanted ads, and if you use code JEDI, you can save a whopping 83% plus get 3 months free. And if that wasn't good enough, they offer a 30-day back money guarantee if you're not completely satisfied, so make sure to click the link in the description down below to try out Surfshark for yourself. Now this season does start off pretty exciting by finally answering the mystery of this paparazzi lady, now making an appearance as a waiter for a special Sundry House event. And while it initially seemed like she was very focused on Joe, it's actually Phoebe that has her attention. Sweet Phoebe, who's become ultra paranoid after the mansion incident. So when this woman approaches her saying that the police need to see her in the hotel's safe room, she goes right along. And it turns out that the safe room is just one of the suites that she's outfitted with extra barricades. Because Don here is a stalker, the type that thinks that she and Phoebe are the best of friends. And goddamn, they might just be the most terrifying type because you cannot reason with them. I've had at least 2 people like this pop up, and there's still places that I don't feel comfortable traveling to because I just don't know what might happen. Now the show specifically refers to it as erotomania, which I shockingly never heard, and I don't feel like that fully applies to Dawn, but it absolutely applies to Joe. I've always just kind of seen it as the most heightened form of parasocial relationship with like some serious mental illness stuff going on as well. And that feels more like what's going on with Dawn. Because after looking into it, erotomania, as I assumed from the title, specifically deals with people who believe someone who they've never spoken to is in love with them, and oftentimes it's some kind of celebrity. And they'll take very little things as being like personal messages to them. So say like you put out a public tweet and used a purple heart, they might think that that's like a special message just to them, even though you've never spoken to them. And I don't think Dawn's motivations are sexual or romantic. I could be wrong, but she mostly just seems concerned about this eat the rich killer. And she's also just really concerned that Phoebe doesn't have her matching tattoo anymore.
Did it heal over?
We will give you another one.
can use this. It'll be fine.
You know, she's also clearly just a major hazard because she's not thinking logically. But Phoebe, while terrified, handles this like a pro. Plays into it in just the right ways to keep things calm and even manages to get some information about how Adam's broke and using her for money. But thankfully, Joe shows up. Oh no, why the hell am I saying thankfully Joe shows up? Do you see what you're doing? Bad writers.
Whatever relationship you think you have with this woman, you don't. You care. That part is real, I know. Let her go.
Literally giving her the advice that he needs to hear the most. And instead of it being this like grand revelation for him, it just lets him get control of the situation. Which is when Phoebe finally snaps, and girl, I get it.
You think you know me, Dawn? What am I gonna do next?
And during the scuffle, Joe plants Simon's ear on Dawn so she goes down as the Eat the Rich killer. Joe, look, I know she needs help, but not a murder trial level of help. You, on the other hand. Now, the reason why he needed to snatch the ear on someone is because Rhys made him. Find someone new to set up, or you're the one who's gonna go down. But I guess he mainly just wants to be Joe's friend, I guess, you know, friend and murder for hire. So the new plan is to kill Kate's dad. These are the deaths that never end. Which is a bit awkward because he's now dating Kate. He tried to stay away, but she says she doesn't care who he used to be because she's also running from her past. And she's like immediately talking about locations in London where they can move. Like, man, this is a straight relationship. You are not allowed to U-Haul. Now, Rhys apparently wants Kate's dad out of the way because he's backing one of his political opponents. And as usual, if Joe doesn't go along with it, Rhys will expose him. But this whole conversation has Rhys throwing in things about Dawn and the voices in my head made me do it being hard to disprove, which isn't true, but seems like we're building towards the conclusion that a lot of people assumed and I really hope they wouldn't be going for, which we'll get to, but first it's time to meet Kate's father.
Looking forward to getting to know you, Joe.
Hey, it's Greg Kinnear, who also has a bunch of fuck you money and was able to do a deep background check. Clearly watching his daughter's every move to the point that I'm surprised he hasn't had Joe murdered for being near his daughter yet, because he at least knows Joe faked his own death in a situation in which his wife died. And it seems like there's a couple reasons why Daddy Dearest is in town. One, he's trying to bribe Kate back to New York, but he also seems to want to use Joe to help get Rhys out of the picture. I guess they'll be running a story revealing that Rhys fabricated a bunch of his memoir, but he really wants Joe to help him get the kill shot. Again, in exchange for keeping quiet about his real identity, which Rhys immediately susses out and pops up with Marianne's passport. I knew she couldn't be in the clear. Apparently he tracked her down and Joe has 24 hours to kill Tom Lockwood or Rhys is gonna kill Marianne. But Tom also wants Rhys dead.
And I think you did kill Love Quinn. When push comes to shove, you can do it. And do it well enough to get off scot-fucking-free.
What a fucking mess of a story is going on here. Even if Joe's Rhys isn't real Rhys, this is madness. Lockwood didn't get that story published to ruin Rhys, it was to push him into hiding so Joe would have access to him. I just can't believe any of this. But he's gonna do it, and Rhys does seem to be the dick that we've come to know through Joe, but...
So I don't know you.
It becomes very obvious that Rhys has no idea who Joe is, doesn't even crack when Joe starts to zip tie his balls.
Do you know I had to read to learn how to do this to you?
I don't know anyone called Marianne.
I wish you would stop acting.
But while this is happening, Nadia has started to question Professor Moore's involvement in everything going on with the Eat the Rich killer case. Thinks that Dawn seems a little bit too obvious, so she breaks into his place and finds a key hidden inside a copy of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because of course. And Eddie here thinks she might be onto something because Dawn had taken some photos of Professor Moore regularly going to a building that happens to be by the Indian restaurant he brought Kate to, before cutting back to Joe strangling Rhys to death in a fit of rage. Which is when his Rhys pops back up because yes, his Rhys has been in his head the entire time, meaning that he's the real killer. I hate it. I hate it so much. Which is when it cuts back to Nadia finding Marianne in a classic Joe cage. How does he keep finding the materials and the ability to build these fuckers by himself? Just conveniently finds this abandoned location in London to build it in.
It's so dumb.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep using that clip. This might be the Joe I've been waiting to see, but the execution. Why? You guys are now blending together multiple types of hallucinations, delusions, parasocial relationships, and erotomania in ways that just don't really track together. And I get it, it makes for great reveal moments. Because there's a couple layers going on. One being that Joe has been very obsessed with Rhys, listening to all of his books, all of his life stories, thinks they have a connection, but then takes it to that next level and has him hallucinating full conversations with him, oftentimes in public, conveniently where no one seems to notice. And if you've gotten to the point that you're seeing full physical manifestations of someone in your hallucinations, like, you are really just not functioning well in day-to-day life. Now, that obsession over an individual turning to rage can be very normal if the individual stops behaving in the way that you expect them to, which we've seen happen with Joe a lot. But this just shoots off in a completely different direction where he starts to kill people and plays a little whodunit against himself. Because his reasons for killing these people are pretty stupid. And their engagement with the eat the rich concept also seems pretty stupid to me, especially after the reveal. So somehow Joe is simultaneously fully obsessed with Rhys, his biggest fan, but then locks that fact away and creates an evil manifestation of him that he seems to be using as a way to cover his own actions he'd rather not acknowledge, like kidnapping Marianne. Essentially blending an extreme parasocial relationship with a dissociated identity that he can talk to, but then also have it act through him. Really going in on the whole Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde business. It's a psychological logical disaster, and I hate it. I do like the idea of him getting obsessive over a dude for a change, and I'll even take him dissociating from his actions to an extent. But then there's just like 5 more things smashed in there. And after he kills the real Rhys, his fake Rhys is just always around chatting with him, like when Harry keeps popping up in Dexter. Though I will say that they did do a good job keeping that in check on the show, even though a lot of people did anticipate that was the direction it was going. Anytime Joe thought that Rhys was around with other people, he only talked to him when the other people weren't around. And the one time he does acknowledge him in the group, it immediately stops the existing conversation.
Oh, no, it's fine. What was that?
It instantly feels weird, but I guess you're just supposed to take it as the Richies being upset at the poor for speaking up.
He nodded politely because you were staring.
And Joe still doesn't even realize the extent of his obsession. It has to be pointed out to him later, before he ever saw Nadia reading the book about Rhys, he'd already gone through his full catalog. He just completely forgot how obsessed he was. Which they implies happened before, but I always took that less as him forgetting and more just him refusing to acknowledge what a creepy little weirdo he is. Really? Come on. Just 1 second. It's for the showrunners this time. Stop! Okay, that might have come out a little bit aggressive, but I think we're all on the same page now. So why did Joe kill these people? Other than him generally sucking. This was apparently Joe taking all the pieces of himself that he hates and putting it inside someone else and like giving it a face. So that he doesn't have to acknowledge it, but then it'll just kind of do things for him. He killed Malcolm for shit-talking Marianne, which he was only doing to make Joe feel better. Justifies killing Simon because he abused young artists. That's fucking dumb. And Gemma was because she was getting overly accusatory about him being the killer. But killing the person that accused you of being a killer almost immediately after they accused you of being a killer is a surefire way to seem more guilty. It's just so dumb. Like when I said I wanted them to get Joe back to being the monster that he is, I absolutely did not mean like this. Rhys taking them out for political reasons is way more interesting and satisfying while still tickling the drama itch. I realize that this is just starting to sound like, he's a super unstable murderer, but not like that. But yeah, not like that. He is very motivated by what his idea of love is and anything that might get in the way of that, even if the subject of that desire becomes the issue themselves by acting outside of his expectations. So out of those 3, murdering Malcolm in a drunken mishap for insulting Marianne makes the most sense for him. Killing Simon for taking advantage of artists? Really? Stop. But fake Rhys says it was because he was overcompensating for Joe's redemption arc? Like he was killing them more because Joe wanted to protect the group from a shadow killer? Okay. But now he has to accept who he is to remember where he put Marianne. So let's check in on her. Now this episode was actually quite interesting because it was almost entirely from Marianne's perspective and how she's trying to remain strong while literally trapped in a pit. It reframes Joe's perspective on the situation where he thought he let her go by having him drug her coffee, then somehow managing to grab her in broad daylight and get her back inside his apartment. Pulling the whole, I'm so glad we got to give this relationship a proper go shtick. If this doesn't end with her absolutely shit-rocking his life, I'm gonna be so pissed. I'm gonna be so pissed. Now her disassociating into her mind and imagining time with her daughter makes sense. She's trapped in a literal dungeon, she's injured, she's not being cared for properly, he hasn't given her anything to read or do. Disassociating from that situation makes complete sense. Also, reminder that she used to be a drug addict and had to get clean before she could get her daughter back. And Rhys Joe left her with a bunch of painkillers that she's got to try to avoid using for her broken arm. But it was really just nice to see someone like really persevering in this horrible situation, because at some point Joe just stops coming around. Likely right about the time he has that Rhys manifesting outside of himself, because once that happened he stopped blackout disassociating, which is when Nadia shows up. And for some reason Marianne doesn't want her to call the cops. Says that if they screw anything up he'll just disappear and she'll never be safe. But ma'am, if you don't get out of that cage you'll never be safe. And Nadia's just gonna have to go about her life with Joe as her teacher. But they come up with a plan that if it works she'll be free, and if it doesn't she dies. Good averages. You want to know what scenario you absolutely live? Calling the cops. Because fake Rhys is pretty sure that Nadia is onto them, even though she just deflects it away with some boy problems. And even though he's concerned about Marianne, at this point his obsession is focused on Kate.
I should be helping you, not running around trying to save a woman I allegedly missed her hided while in a complete blackout.
He does eventually find the key right around the time he realizes how obsessed he was with Rhys before he got the book from Nadia. Even has a dedicated stalker box with Rhys's used gum, sweaty towel, map of his favorite locations, and that map leads him to Marianne because it's right across the street from Rhys's favorite Indian spot. My god. Aw, Joe's just a stan. But there's some good tension here because Nadia was down there planning with Marianne right as Joe walks in and just narrowly escapes detection. And he is horrified, but like Nadia, doesn't know what to do. And before he can figure it out, he has to leave for a wedding because, yeah, there's a wedding. Everything going on should already be enough drama, but no, they are full steam ahead with Phoebe and Adam. I guess after being held at knife point by someone she believes murdered her friends, Phoebe's starting to break down. She initially ended things with Adam after everything Dawn told her, and he's apparently homeless because he couldn't pay back his investors. But Kate, against her better judgment, lets him drive Phoebe to the hospital retreat to get herself mentally better.
I'll drive.
I thought you were homeless.
I still have the Aston for one more day, Kate.
Oh my god.
And not only does he not take her there, he just completely derails the entire thing and takes advantage of her mental state to push her into a marriage, literally turning the engagement party into a rushed wedding. Keeps her drugged up, both legally and prescription-wise, and starts using all her assets to further fuck up his business ventures. And anytime someone tries to get to Phoebe, Adam intervenes, which ultimately results in her having a full psychotic break after the wedding, which is when Kate's dad pops up to offer help. Because again, he's trying to get her back to New York. He wants her to take over the company.
I need you.
Can you give the museum a rest?
To take over the company.
How many children are dead this time?
And his method of dealing with Adam, having him brutally beat down and murdered. Man, Daddy's money really can solve everything.
Did what you asked.
I never asked you.
Damn, Daddy Kate. I realize that rich people can make a lot of things go away, but come on. Adam's family's also rich. But he really thought that's what she wanted and expects her to wrap up everything in London and head to New York within a couple weeks. Which is when he drops that he's been manipulating her entire life from behind the scenes. Her first internship, every job, silenced an article about Simon, buried a sexual harassment suit against Malcolm.
I keep you happy. I keep you safe.
That would just suck so hard to realize. But that wedding night was the last night that Joe planned to see Kate. He's getting a new passport, fleeing to Spain, setting the cage up on a timer to free Marianne. But when he goes to set the timer, Marianne asks him to check on Juliet, whose grandmother now assumes she was on a bender, is bringing Juliet back to America, which is essentially ruining Marianne's life. And things become an even bigger issue when Joe literally can't remember the code to the door. And whatever he gave her to drink apparently has something she's allergic to in it, which kicks Joe into a full head hallucination to try to find the key to the door, which is where Love appears. Sorry to all you people who thought Love was still alive, you fell for the bait.
Hi, Joe.
What the fuck is happening to me?
And it's not just her, we also get Gemma and Beck. And as nice as it was to have him being mentally fucked with, it's not even real and we can't enjoy it because we're worried about Marianne. We're rooting for him in this moment so a woman won't die.
Somebody does need to die for this to end for good.
Yup. But then he wakes up back on his couch because this was a tranquilizer dream because he had taken some to silence Rhys. But I guess his new plan is to free her and kill himself. Putting himself out there as the guy who just wants to do better and just fight the real monster that's inside him. But then it seems like Marianne did pass out in the night. It looks like she OD'd on the pain pills, but I was kind of wondering if she was faking this and it's gonna like pop up and stab him. Because all we really know is that her and Nadia have been scheming. But apparently she's dead and just left a note asking to have her body left where it would be found so her daughter wouldn't spend her whole life wondering what happened to her. And if she is faking, risky plan if Joe decides that her body needs to properly be disposed of. But they really set it up to seem like Nadia completely failed in her mission. She gets stopped by the police, and when she fills Edward in on everything here, the glass cage is just gone. So she now wants to find irrefutable evidence of Joe's crime so he can be properly arrested. But you know what, kids? Just stay the fuck out of it. Could've just called the cops. They would've DNA tested him and found out he was supposed to be dead in America. But it just keeps getting messier, I guess. Rhys's body gets found in the woods with DNA on it, and fake Rhys convinces Joe that Kate's dad set him up, which is right when Kate calls him over, which is distracting him from his suicide plans. And she fully reveals the extent to which her father's been stalking her entire life.
I broke into his office and there was this file who I'd given a blowjob to, even my fucking menstrual cycle.
So now she's in bed with another stalker. Daddy issues. But this is just the motivation Joe needs to take Daddy Dearest out of the equation before he offs himself. And it's going well. Tom's just talking about how money can save him and he can be Joe again until one of his security guards come back, so Joe has to kill them both, and then pins it all on the guard. He then spends the evening learning about Tom, realizing his banking information is likely encrypted within these very obvious cryptography books he has around, transfers $2 million from an account to the bodyguard to make it seem like it was blackmail, and then disposes the body.
Last corpse I'll ever have to bury.
Yeah, we'll see about that, pal. So he goes to jump off a bridge and first pulls a fight club by launching fake Rhys off first and then jumping himself.
All I've ever wanted is to love and to be loved completely.
Joseph, you had that, and then you got freaked out when she matched your energy because you thought she was unhinged, which she was, but she was unhinged for you. But he survives, which honestly I'm good with because his demise deserves to be worse. But just like Fight Club, it seems like he's alone now that he killed fake Rhys. So Kate's there when he wakes up and he just lays out the honesty, like literally says that he's killed people. But she already knows about at least one. Somebody from her father's company mentioned that Kate might know who killed Rhys and assumes her father made him do it. And he admits it, but she says that sadly the DNA was inconclusive, so no one will ever know who killed Rhys.
In my soul, I know you are good.
Bestie, no!
We keep each other good.
But girl, your brand of wanting to impress daddy leading to death is not the same as his brand of obsession leading to murder. But I guess he tells her everything, or at least his real name, and the stuff that happened with Love. I'm not sure about the New York stuff. Oh god, this is just not gonna be good. But now it's time to swing back with Nadia and figure out what happened with Marianne. And they have two plans, the main one being kill Joe so he won't be able to track Marianne after she escapes. And plan B was to use beta blockers so that her heart rate would slow so much that Joe would assume she had OD'd. And to make it believable that she'd do it, they needed Joe to believe she had nothing left to live for, so they swapped Nadia's number into Beatrice's, the person who was taking care of Juliet, and made him think that the grandmother was taking her away. Joe thankfully honors her request and leaves her on a park bench where Nadia pops up to administer the antidote. So Marianne's home free, but this is all just very clearly a stupid way to make sure Joe won't get caught this season. But because he's still free, these two idiots want to break into his flat again to try to find some kind of evidence of his crime. And while Nadia does find the Rhys stalker buck, Joe catches them. It's very menacing, but it seems like he's gonna work out a deal with them before hard cutting to Antihero by Taylor Swift. Because of course. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. Yes, Joe, it's you. You're the problem. And now it seems like it's just gonna close out the show with one of his classic monologues.
As someone wise once said, if you don't grow, you rot. Some people want to rot.
He's going on about growth and how those other rich people are just running themselves into the ground with ignorance, privilege, and stagnation. Joseph, are we really going to be high and mighty here? Antihero is a fun pick for the season, especially part 1, because it kind of seemed to be designed around us rooting for the anti-hero that he sees himself as. But no, it's not exhausting rooting for the anti-hero. What's exhausting is the way you set this up to play out. At least Phoebe's off living her best life teaching English to kids in Thailand.
We earned the life we were meant to live.
Joseph, the only life you're meant to live is one in a cell, preferably one in a pit run by a victim. But quite the contrary, he now has the full power and money of the Lockwood Empire. And they managed to completely rehabilitate Joe Goldberg's image. Play the story as him escaping his twisted wife, shutting down anything online that suggests otherwise. Thankfully, Marianne is still safe with her daughter, but obviously pissed about everything going on with Joe. But what she should be extra pissed and personally upset about is the fact that Joe killed Eddie, set him up to go down for Rhys's murder, and then has Nadia take the fall for killing Eddie when she found out. And she just goes to prison because she refuses to say a word about any of it.
You have so many gifts. I'm looking forward to watching what you do next.
Prison Joe, that's what she's doing next. All they had to do was call the cops. They would have let her out immediately and arrested him, and none of this would have happened. But sure, yeah, no, we need the beta blocker plan. But Joe and Kate seem super happy, though they do keep drawing attention to the way that Joe grabs her knee, so who knows? They're currently on a mission to save the world, which apparently includes him killing people on her behalf?
So many ways to do that. Sure, killing's one of many, but it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all solution. Though the killing part's also much easier now that I'm honest with myself about it. I'm just here to help.
Okay, this is only so realistic. Like, yes, rich people can cover up and do and get away with horrible things, even murder, I would presume, but like not as a regular occurrence. What in the corporate Punisher vigilante bullshit is this gonna be? What happened to him getting his comeuppance? What are they gonna do with this? I originally thought this was gonna be the last season, but there's no way they can do it like this. Now, outside the logistical issues of this killing, that is just not the way Joe operates. He's never been someone who gets something specifically out of the act of killing. The killing is always just the outcome of his erotomania and parasocial stalking victims not behaving the way he expects, or when he's trying to do something to protect them or protect himself in that scenario. I guess maybe they could reason it out as anybody who's a risk to Kate or standing in opposition of her goals, but that's really not how it feels like it's presented. Oh, this whole season is just so fucking weird. It seems like they wanted to put in a lot of really big ideas, but then they introduce this whole class issue, but then don't know what to do with it. One thing I will say that I liked is that when he was manifesting this other killer that was actually him, he was using it as a reason to kind of like stalk Kate around to protect her. So like that tracks with his normal behavior, but otherwise it's just so messy. But that's pretty much it for You Season 4 Part 2. They really just dove into a lot of different options. It feels like they spent like 5 episodes of Part 1 building something up just so they could launch it into a different direction, which isn't inherently wrong. It is just really hard to work with this type of character in the way that they're trying to work with him. But let me know what you guys are thinking down below. I kind of have to assume that next season would be the finale, and maybe they will just blow it into this like huge, overly dramatic, awesome thing that like tracks well. I'm still personally excited for it. I do still enjoy watching the show, even if I end up having a lot of issues with its execution. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.